I've been happily married to my wife, Susie, for the past 4.5 years. From the start, we've had great communication, and over time, our connection has only deepened. Sure, there might be the occasional disagreement like in any relationship, but nothing major or drawn out. We've learned how to respect each other's space and opinions. One of the things I'm especially proud of in our marriage is our strong, intimate connection. We maintain a healthy sex life, which has helped us stay close emotionally and physically. We've also kept a tradition of going out for dates every Friday, no matter how busy life gets. It's something we both look forward to. Professionally, I've been working long hours to provide for both of us, especially since Susie has been out of work for almost 2 years now. When she first lost her job, I'll admit it was a bit challenging. I had to pick up extra hours at work, and it felt overwhelming to manage both of our expenses on my own. There were times I worried about how long I could keep up with the financial pressure, but, thankfully, my hard work paid off and we've gotten to a much more stable place now. Susie, on her part, has made several attempts to get back into the workforce but has always been rejected. Hence, with time, she has come to terms with her situation and transitioned more into the role of a stay-at-home wife. Although she does occasionally work as a freelancer here and there, her income isn't really significant. Susie and I don't have any children, so her day-to-day routine primarily revolves around household tasks like cooking and cleaning. She's very dedicated to keeping our home in order, but she also enjoys relaxing in front of the TV and watching her favorite series. I would always encourage her to get out of the house more often and do things she enjoys outside of our home, whether it's meeting up with her friends or even joining a gym to get some exercise. But the truth is, she rarely ever took me up on these suggestions. As a result, because of her sedentary lifestyle, Susie gained a fair bit of weight over the years. Now, let me be clear, this was never an issue for me. I love Susie no matter what, and her weight had no impact on how I felt about her. To me, she was still the wonderful, loving person I fell in love with, and I made sure she knew that. However, one evening when I came home from work, I found Susie in a state of complete distress. She was crying sitting on the floor. I rushed to console her and asked what was wrong. She silently pointed to the pile of clothes on the floor, most of which had been angrily thrown out of her wardrobe. She told me while crying that she didn't fit into her clothes anymore. She revealed between her tears that she didn't even recognize herself in the mirror anymore due to her weight gain. I did everything I could to console her, reassuring her that she was still the same amazing woman I had married and that her weight didn't change that. I even suggested we go shopping together so she could buy some new clothes that would fit and make her feel better. My intention was simply to ease her frustration by getting her outfits that she felt good in, but my suggestion backfired. Instead of feeling supported, Susie got even more upset. She started crying even louder, insisting that I didn't understand her at all. She said she didn't want to wear bigger clothes because doing so felt like admitting defeat. She didn't want to acknowledge the weight gain at all. I felt genuinely bad for Susie that night. Seeing her in so much pain over her weight gain made me realize that the issue was more than just about clothes or appearance, it was about how she felt about herself. Wanting to help, I gently urged her to acknowledge the weight gain so we could then tackle this together. I suggested that we could start waking up early every morning and go for a run together. It wasn't just about exercise. I wanted to show her that we were a team in this and that I was fully committed to supporting her. I also pointed out to her that we'd stop bringing in unhealthy snacks like chips and cookies during grocery shopping. I knew those were her usual go-tos, but I figured if we both shifted towards healthier meals and snacks, it would be easier for her to stay on track. At first, Susie seemed reluctant. I could tell she wasn't fully on board, and it made sense this was a big change, and she was already feeling vulnerable. But after some time, and with a bit of encouragement, she agreed to give it a try. Over the past 10 to 11 months, we've completely transformed our lifestyle together. In the beginning, it was tough for both of us, especially for Susie. She had to adjust to a whole new routine of waking up early with me and fitting in exercise where she hadn't before. But little by little, things started to click. As the weeks went by, Susie began to find her rhythm, and I was amazed at her determination. I could see her confidence gradually returning as she became more active and started making healthier choices when it came to her mealtime. Then, about 2 months ago, she took a huge step and joined a gym to start strength training. Unfortunately, because of my long work hours, I wasn't able to join her at the gym, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that she had taken this step on her own, and I couldn't have been prouder of her decision. She was stronger, healthier, and, most importantly, happier. I slowly watched her blossom into someone who is far more outgoing and confident. She started going out more frequently, made new friends at her gym, and even started experimenting with her looks. In many ways, she had become the best version of herself, and I was so proud of my wife. When I got promoted at work, I wanted to celebrate this big achievement with her. With my promotion came more financial security, and I was excited about the future for us. So I planned a special evening out, hoping to make it a memorable night for both of us. During the date, I brought up something to Susie that had always been a part of our long-term plan, starting a family. With the promotion, I felt that the timing was perfect for us. I told Susie that now, more than ever, we were in a stable position financially, and it was the right time to try for kids. I thought she would be happy, especially since this had been our plan all along, and we had talked about it many times in the past. But as soon as I mentioned it, I noticed a shift in her mood. She grew quiet, which was unusual, especially given the fact that she had always told me how much she wanted to become a mother. I continued, telling her how this promotion was a stepping stone toward achieving our dream of becoming parents. I was excited and even told her that once she got pregnant, I would make arrangements at work to reduce my hours so I could be more present at home and help her out with everything. I was fully committed to being a more present dad and husband. Despite my enthusiasm, Susie didn't seem to share the same feelings. Her expression grew more somber as I spoke, and she stayed unusually quiet. Seeing the gloom on her face, I knew something was off. Concerned, I asked her what was wrong, wanting to understand what was going through her mind. This is when Susie revealed to me that she was having second thoughts about having kids. I was caught off guard. It wasn't what I had expected to hear at all. She continued to tell me this just wasn't the right time for kids and that we should be enjoying our youth and freedom for a few more years at least. I tried to ask her for specific reasons why she felt this way so suddenly, but she didn't want to elaborate. Although I was a bit heartbroken, I assured her that I was willing to put our plans on hold at the moment and that we could talk about this topic again in the future. For the rest of the evening, we continued talking about other things. In hindsight, I realize now that I should have encouraged her to open up more about what was really going on in her mind. At the time, I thought I was respecting her space by not pressing the issue, but looking back, I now see this as the first indication that something was starting to go wrong in our marriage. Over the next few weeks after our conversation, I noticed that Susie began to grow distant from me. It wasn't sudden, but a gradual shift. Small things started to change in our relationship. For example, Susie stopped having dinner with me every night like she always used to. Instead, she would eat earlier in the evening and then spend most of her nights in bed, glued to her phone or watching the TV on her own. Susie began skipping our usual date nights, something we had always made a priority. When I would ask her to reschedule and spend time with me instead, she would argue that she had already made plans with her new friends from the gym and did not want to cancel them. I knew that her newfound social life and confidence were important to her, so I tried to be as supportive as possible. But at the same time, it was hard not to feel hurt by the growing distance between us. Then things worsened one night when she was out with her friends. Susie had gone out like she usually did and normally would be back before 11 p.m., and if she was running late, she'd always let me know by text. But this time, the clock kept ticking, and she didn't come home at her usual time. I called her phone around 11:30, just to check if everything was okay, but the call went straight to voicemail. It was getting late, and I couldn't sleep, so I stayed up, hoping to hear the door open or at least get a call back from her. Then, finally, around 1:30 a.m., the doorbell rang. I practically jumped up from my bed and rushed downstairs. When I opened the door, what I saw left me stunned. Susie was almost limp, smelled strongly of alcohol, was barely able to stand, and was hugging a man for support. There were other people standing around her. I invited them in as I realized that these were the people she usually hung out with. The man, who was helping Susie walk, gently put her down on the sofa, where she immediately passed out. I was confused and concerned looking at my wife, so I asked them what had happened. One of the girls stepped forward and explained that they had partied a bit too hard that night as it was her birthday and that Susie had a little too much to drink than usual. I was a bit surprised to hear this since my wife never drank more than a glass of wine with me. The girl continued to assure me there was no reason to worry and that they had made sure to bring her home safely, along with her phone and handbag, which they handed over to me. I appreciated their gesture, but seeing Susie in such a state, so unlike her usual self, was unsettling. As I looked around at the group of people in my living room, I quickly realized that they were all much younger than me and Susie. I had never met them before and asked if they were in their early 20s. They all nodded in confirmation. One of the guys introduced himself as Mark and mentioned that they all went to the gym together, which is how they became friends with Susie. I nodded and thanked them for bringing her home. After they left, I felt a deep sense of unease. Seeing my wife passed out on the couch like that, after what seemed like a wild night out with people so much younger than us, left me with so many questions. The next morning, I gently confronted my wife about everything. I asked her about the night, specifically about how she had ended up in such a state. But instead of showing concern or regret, Susie tried to brush it off. She told me she was just enjoying with her friends and was now left embarrassed because she couldn't handle her drink. She laughed as if it wasn't a big deal and assured me that it wouldn't happen again. Still concerned, I asked her if something else had happened that night, if there was any possibility someone had spiked her drink or taken advantage of the situation. But Susie shook her head and told me that I needed to stop overthinking. She assured me that everything was fine and that her friends wouldn't do anything like that. She insisted it was completely her fault for drinking too much, and she had simply lost control. I then asked her more gently why she had been drinking so frequently. She started to look irritated as she answered that apparently this is what young people usually do when they hang out, and she wanted to fit in. She admitted that she had always limited her drinks to 3 or 4 shots while hanging out with them, and, to cover up her tracks from me, she would even come back home and quickly brush her teeth so I wouldn't notice the smell of alcohol. That admission surprised me. It wasn't just about her drinking, it was the fact that she had been intentionally hiding this part of her life from me. I started to wonder what else I might not know about. Trying to piece everything together, I asked her if this was the reason why she never wanted me to meet her friends. Maybe she thought I would judge her, or maybe she felt embarrassed about it. But instead of explaining, Susie rolled her eyes in exasperation. She snapped back, saying it wasn't mandatory for me to meet her friends and that there was no reason for me to make a big deal about it. She confessed that she could not make friends with anyone older at the gym while this group of people were very welcoming to her and she liked hanging out with them. My intention wasn't to accuse her of anything. I calmly reassured her that I had no issue with her making new friends or who they were. I was simply curious about why she hadn't told me sooner. From that point onward, Susie's behavior only became more concerning. Now that she had admitted to going out drinking with her friends, it seemed like she no longer felt the need to hide any of her actions from me. In fact, she began dressing in much more revealing outfits whenever she went out: short skirts, low-cut tops, and high heels. What bothered me even more was that she began coming back home later and later. Susie would come back in the early hours of the morning, always completely drunk and barely coherent. It was becoming a pattern, and I couldn't help but feel increasingly weirded out by her behavior. This wasn't the woman I had married. In addition to her late-night outings, my wife also started neglecting her responsibilities around the house. She stopped cooking meals altogether, something used to enjoy doing for both of us. There were no more groceries in the fridge because she would forget to go shopping. With my long work hours, it became increasingly difficult for me to manage both my job and household duties. I was already feeling stressed at work, and now I had to take care of everything at home too. It frustrated me, especially since Susie didn't seem to care about the impact her growing behavior was having on our lives. One day, I decided to confide in one of my close friends about what was going on at home. I laid it all out: Susie's late-night drinking, her neglect of the house, and how distant she had become. I was expecting my friend to offer me some reassurance, but instead, he hit me with a dose of harsh reality. He pointed out that these were all massive red flags, things I had been overlooking because I still wanted to believe the best about Susie. He told me bluntly that it was very possible my wife was cheating on me, and that I needed to stop seeing her through rose-colored glasses. That conversation shook me to my core. The idea that Susie might be unfaithful had never fully crossed my mind, but once my friend said it out loud, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Her erratic behavior, the late nights, the secrecy, it all started to make sense in a way I didn't want to admit. I grew wary, and from that moment, I began paying much closer attention to her actions. One thing I noticed immediately was how much time she spent on her phone. She was constantly texting or scrolling through social media, but the way she did it felt different, more secretive. She would often hide the screen when I was nearby or quickly change apps if I came into the room. It made me suspicious. I knew that if I wanted to find out the truth, I would need to get my hands on her phone. That night, after Susie came home drunk and passed out on the bed, snoring like she often did after her nights out, I made my move. Quietly, I slipped out of bed and grabbed her phone from her bag, my heart pounding in my chest. I hurried out of the room, careful not to wake her, and found a quiet corner in the house to check her phone. It felt strange and wrong, but I had to know the truth, even if it meant going behind her back. The first hurdle was getting into the phone. Susie had recently changed her password, and I didn't know it. For a moment, I panicked, but then I remembered that Susie was forgetful. She likely would have changed it to something she could easily remember. I began trying different significant dates: her birthday, our anniversaries, but none of them worked. Then, on a hunch, I tried her mother's birthday, a date I knew she held close to her heart. To my surprise, it worked. I had unlocked her phone. With shaky hands, I started going through her messages, my stomach in knots, fearing what I might find. At first, there was nothing out of the ordinary, just casual conversations with some of her gym friends, including a few with Mark, the guy who had helped carry her home that one night. But the more I scrolled, the more my heart sank. There it was, plain as day messages between Susie and Mark that went far beyond just friendly banter. They were flirtatious and intimate, and then there were messages and photos exchanged between them that left no doubt that Susie had been having a physical relationship with him. The texts went back weeks, maybe even months. In one of their most recent conversations, they had discussed skipping the gym and going to a nearby motel instead to have their usual fun time. My heart dropped when I read that. It was clear that Susie had been cheating on me with Mark all along. I quickly took photos of the messages, making sure I had enough evidence in case I needed it later. I was disgusted, heartbroken, and furious all at once. The trust I had in my wife, the woman I had loved and had been married to for years, was shattered. I decided that I needed more than just text messages. I needed to catch her in the act, to confront her with undeniable proof. The motel plan they had discussed in their texts gave me the perfect opportunity. I knew what I had to do next: catch my wife red-handed. That is exactly what I did. The following day, with the weight of the previous night's discovery still heavy on my shoulders, I decided to take action. I knew that Susie and Mark had planned to meet up at the motel. I left work early and drove to the motel where I knew they would be, hoping to catch them in the act. When I arrived, I saw Susie and Mark pull up in separate cars, just as I had anticipated. They were laughing and seemingly in high spirits, completely oblivious to what was about to unfold. I took photos of them as they made their way into the motel, my hands shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. After about an hour, they emerged from the motel. The sight of Susie, with her hair disheveled and a look of carefree contentment on her face, made my blood boil. I got out of my car and walked towards them, holding my phone up to record the whole scene. My intention was to capture everything on film, so there would be no doubt about what was happening. When Susie saw me approaching, her expression changed in an instant. She froze, her face going pale as she realized what was about to happen. Mark, on the other hand, remained silent and looked visibly scared, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. At that moment, I completely lost control. My anger and hurt were all consuming, and I shouted every insult and name I could think of. I was livid beyond words. I told Mark he could have her, that I was done with her cheating, broke ass. Susie started to beg, tears streaming down her face as she ran after me. But I got into my car and drove away, my heart pounding in my chest. I managed to get home before Susie did, and I quickly packed a few essential items: clothes, personal belongings, and anything else I thought I might need. Then I headed to a nearby hotel, needing a place to escape and collect my thoughts. That night, fueled by a mix of anger, confusion, and a bit of alcohol, I made the rash decision to post the video on Facebook. I wanted everyone to know how my wife had shattered our marriage, to expose the truth so she could not go around acting like a victim. I don't remember much after that, but the next morning, I woke up to a barrage of missed calls. My phone was lit up with notifications from friends, family, and, of course, Susie. Feeling overwhelmed, I decided to call back my parents first. I didn't want them to worry, and I needed to hear their voices. When I reached my dad, he expressed his disbelief that Susie had been unfaithful and offered his full support if I wanted to leave her. I felt reassured by his support. But then I called my mom and she had a very different take than my dad. While she acknowledged my pain and the reason for my reaction, she told me that she wanted me to carefully think things over with a much clearer head. I was taken aback as she continued to emphasize that Susie was my wife and that family is family no matter what. I argued that Susie had cheated on me, so she was no longer going to be my family. My mom argued that sometimes accidents like this can happen in a family and that not everything is so black and white. I asked her what she meant by accident, and my mom responded cryptically that people can't always stay loyal in their marriages for a long time, and that sometimes mistakes can happen. Confused and hurt by her words, I pressed further, asking her if she had ever cheated on Dad. But she remained quiet, and that has only confused me further. Since then, I've been plagued with unsettling thoughts that my mom might be hiding something. No good parent would ever encourage their child to work things out with a cheating partner. I can't help but wonder if my mom is concealing something from us, which is why she's pushing me to reconcile with my cheating wife. Ida for suspecting my mom, or am I overthinking this because I have just been betrayed by my wife? Update 1. To clarify further on why I am suspecting something is wrong, my mom has always been incredibly supportive, just like my dad. As their only child, I've been raised with love and encouragement, and my mom has always stood up for me, never even letting anyone bully or talk down to me. Yet, for some reason, she believes Susie deserves another chance, despite the infidelity. After reading some of your comments, I'm now considering getting a DNA test done. I don't want to discuss this with my dad before the results are in. If the test confirms that I'm biologically related to both my parents, then I suppose there's nothing to worry about. Also, Susie has been bombarding me with texts and voicemails, begging for forgiveness. She admitted that she felt very flattered when Mark showed interest during her gym sessions. She said it felt weirdly sexy to be desired by someone younger and that she just couldn't resist him. Despite her pleas for another chance, I'm beyond caring at this point. Update 2. Thanks to some of your suggestions, I've reached out to a lawyer to begin the divorce process with my ex. Since Susie cheated, I know I won't have to pay her alimony, and will also be asking her to move out of my house soon. Now coming on to the most important part of the update, my dad was a bit curious when I asked him to join me for the DNA test appointment this week. I simply told him it was to check for any potential genetic disorders that might run in the family, and he didn't press further. I also asked him not to mention it to Mom, telling him that it might make her worry unnecessarily about potential conditions before the results came out. He agreed to keep it quiet without thinking a lot. It breaks my heart to lie to him, but it's the only way for me to uncover the truth without alerting my mom beforehand. I'm still waiting on the DNA test results for now and will update once I know more. Update 3. Well, I guess we were all right. My DNA test is out and it has proven that I'm not biologically related to my father. I couldn't stop crying when I found out and drove straight to my parents' house. My dad's eyes nearly popped out when he read the results, and my mom went pale. I won't go into the ugly details because I'm too angry and shaken to write them all out, but my mom finally broke down in tears, after she kept denying it initially, and admitted that she had an affair with a guy 35 years ago. She got pregnant with me from that affair, but, since she was also intimate with my dad, she hoped it might be his. When I was born with brown hair, unlike both of my parents' blonde hair, she suspected strongly that I was the other man's child. However, not wanting to destroy her marriage, she ended things with him quickly and kept the secret hidden. My dad had never questioned her as he had never thought he had a reason to and had always accepted me as I was. After my mom's confessions, my dad was understandably furious. There were a lot of tears and harsh words exchanged, but to keep things short, my dad and I are now staying in my hotel room. He looks numb and hasn't spoken to me much. I feel immense sympathy for my dad because I somewhat understand what he's going through. I can't believe that both my wife and my mother turned out to be such frauds. Update 4. Sorry, it's been almost a month since my last update. First of all, I want to reassure everyone that my dad hasn't abandoned me after the DNA test. He loves me and has made it clear that I will always be his son no matter what. I feel really grateful to have a parent like him. However, he has lost all forgiveness for my mom. He asked her to move out, despite her desperate pleas, and even threatened to throw her belongings out if she didn't leave peacefully. In the end, she went to stay with her sister. I have refused to even look at her as I am so disappointed by her deceit. My dad has met with his lawyer this week to proceed with his divorce. Now coming to my ex, Susie has been served with divorce papers and has been asked to move out. Obviously, she didn't take this lightly and had the audacity to show up at my office begging for another chance. I yelled at her publicly for being so shameless, warning her that if she ever came near me again, I'd get a restraining order. She has no other choice left but to move out. For those asking, I've removed the video of catching her red-handed from my Facebook account for now, but I have stored it securely so I can use it as evidence during our divorce. That snake isn't getting a dime from me. For now, both my dad and I are deeply hurt and heartbroken. But we're determined to heal and move forward. We're focusing on rebuilding our lives and finding strength in each other as we move on from our cheating partners.